When Colonel Elena Vasquez felt her brother's hand crack across her face in front of 400 wedding guests, she thought the humiliation would be the worst part of her day. What she didn't expect was her husband's voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade, his words carrying the weight of a man who had commanded troops in 3 war zones and wasn't about to let anyone disrespect his wife. The protection that followed would reveal depths of loyalty she never knew existed and forever change how her family understood the meaning of respect. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floors where Elena Vasquez stood, adjusting her sister's wedding veil. As a decorated military officer who had spent the last 15 years navigating complex international conflicts and commanding respect in boardrooms filled with generals and diplomats, she rarely felt nervous about social situations. Yet something about today's celebration carried an undercurrent of tension that made her hyper-aware of every interaction and conversation happening around her. Elena had always been the protective older sister, the one who smoothed conflicts and maintained family harmony even when personal costs were high. At 37, she had built an extraordinary career in military intelligence, specializing in counterterrorism operations that had taken her from the mountains of Afghanistan to the diplomatic corridors of Brussels. Her analytical mind and strategic thinking had earned her early promotion to colonel, making her one of the youngest women to achieve that rank in her division. The discipline and precision that characterized her professional life had always extended to her approach to family relationships, where she consistently prioritized unity over personal grievances. The wedding celebration was meant to honor her younger sister Carmen's marriage to David Torres, a successful cardiac surgeon who had captured her heart during their residency at Mass General Hospital. Their relationship represented everything Elena had always hoped to find: authentic love built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine partnership that supported both individuals' professional ambitions while creating something stronger together than either could achieve alone. Carmen had always been the artistic soul of the family, pursuing her passion for documentary photography while building a reputation that had garnered international recognition for her work documenting humanitarian crises around the world. The guest list reflected the convergence of 2 accomplished families with deep roots in their respective communities. Carmen's photography career had connected her with journalists, human rights advocates, and cultural leaders who understood the power of visual storytelling to create social change. David's medical background brought together healthcare professionals, research scientists, and hospital administrators who had witnessed his innovative surgical techniques save lives while training the next generation of cardiac specialists. The celebration would unite these diverse professional networks in recognition of a relationship that had flourished despite the challenges of demanding careers and frequent travel. Elena's own marriage to Marcus Chen had occurred 3 years earlier, in a much smaller ceremony that reflected their preference for privacy and their mutual understanding of the security considerations that governed their professional lives. Marcus served as a senior analyst for the State Department, specializing in Asian-Pacific relations and economic security issues that required clearance levels similar to Elena's own classified work. Their relationship had developed through shared assignments and mutual respect for each other's expertise, before evolving into a partnership that balanced professional obligations with personal commitments, that strengthened both their careers and their marriage. The complexity of their work meant that their relationship operated within constraints that most couples never faced. Extended deployments, classified communications, and security protocols created unique challenges that required trust, patience, and sophisticated understanding of professional obligations that sometimes took precedence over personal preferences. Yet these same challenges had strengthened their bond by creating appreciation for time together while developing communication skills that enabled them to maintain connection despite physical separation and professional pressures. Marcus had been deployed to Seoul for the past 6 months, working on trade negotiations that would affect economic relationships throughout the Pacific region. His absence from daily life had been difficult, but their experience with previous separations had taught them to maintain connection through secure communications and careful planning for reunification periods that maximized quality time together. His return for Carmen's wedding represented not only family celebration, but also personal reunion that Elena had been anticipating for months. The source of tension that Elena sensed throughout the morning preparations centered on her brother Miguel's increasingly erratic behavior during the months leading up to the wedding. At 32, Miguel had struggled to find direction following his discharge from the army after a training accident that ended his military career before it truly began. The injury had shattered his ankle and damaged ligaments in ways that prevented the physical demands of active duty, creating emotional trauma that extended far beyond physical limitations to encompass feelings of failure and lost identity that had characterized his approach to civilian life. Miguel's relationship with Elena had always been complicated by sibling rivalry that intensified as her career advanced while his stagnated. Her military success, combined with her stable marriage and clear sense of purpose, created constant reminders of opportunities he felt he had lost through circumstances beyond his control. The comparison became more painful as Elena received promotions and recognition, while Miguel moved between jobs and relationships without finding satisfaction or stability in professional or personal spheres. The family dynamics around Miguel's struggles had created ongoing stress for everyone, particularly their parents, who found themselves mediating conflicts while trying to support both children's different needs and circumstances. Elena's success made her the family's pride and source of financial stability during difficult periods, while Miguel's challenges required emotional support and patience that sometimes strained relationships and created resentment about perceived favoritism and unequal attention distribution. Recent months had seen escalation in Miguel's behavioral problems, including increased drinking, argumentative interactions with family members, and episodes of anger that seemed disproportionate to triggering events. His attendance at family gatherings had become unpredictable, with mood swings that created anxiety for everyone and forced careful management of seating arrangements and conversation topics to prevent confrontations that could disrupt celebrations or family meetings. Elena's approach to managing Miguel's difficulties had consistently emphasized professional restraint and family loyalty, using conflict resolution skills developed through military training to de-escalate situations while protecting other family members from unnecessary drama. Her natural inclination toward problem-solving had led her to research resources for veterans struggling with transition issues, but Miguel's resistance to accepting help had limited her ability to provide meaningful assistance beyond emotional support and financial help during emergencies. The wedding planning process had revealed the extent of Miguel's resentment toward Elena's success, and his perception that her achievements had overshadowed his own potential contributions to family pride and stability.
Comments about her military career had become increasingly bitter, focusing on suggestions that her promotions reflected favoritism rather than merit, and that her marriage to Marcus represented social climbing rather than genuine affection based on shared values and compatible personalities. These attacks on her character and accomplishments had tested Elena's patience while creating concern about potential disruption to Carmen's celebration. The bride deserved a joyful wedding focused on her happiness rather than family conflicts that had been simmering for years without resolution. Elena's protective instincts towards her sister had motivated careful planning to minimize Miguel's opportunities for creating problems, while ensuring that security arrangements could handle any situations that might arise. The morning of the wedding had begun with optimism, as Miguel appeared to be making efforts to control his behavior and participate appropriately in family celebrations. His interactions during breakfast had been cordial, and his assistance with transportation and setup tasks had demonstrated willingness to contribute positively to the day's success. Elena had allowed herself to hope that the significance of Carmen's wedding would inspire better behavior and perhaps represent a turning point in his approach to family relationships. Marcus's arrival at the cathedral had provided emotional relief and practical support that Elena had been missing during his deployment. His presence created a sense of completeness that enabled her to fully enjoy the celebration while knowing that she had partnership and backup if any difficulties arose. His understanding of family dynamics and his calm demeanor under pressure made him an ideal ally for managing any challenges that might develop throughout the day's events. The ceremony itself had proceeded beautifully, with Carmen and David exchanging vows that reflected their deep commitment and shared vision for their future together. The sacred setting and traditional rituals had created an atmosphere of reverence and celebration that honored not only their relationship but also the families and communities that had supported their journey to this moment. Elena had felt genuine happiness watching her sister begin this new chapter while appreciating the love and support surrounding them from friends and family who had traveled significant distances to witness their union. The transition from ceremony to reception had been seamless, with guests moving to the adjacent reception hall, where elegant decorations and carefully planned logistics created a perfect environment for celebration. The venue's historic architecture and beautiful gardens provided a stunning backdrop for photographs while offering multiple spaces that could accommodate different activities throughout the evening. Elena had been pleased to see Miguel participating appropriately in family photographs and early reception activities, suggesting that her concerns about potential problems might have been unnecessary. The cocktail hour had proceeded without incident, with guests enjoying carefully selected food and beverages while reuniting with friends and family members they hadn't seen in months or years. Elena had circulated among different groups, introducing Marcus to extended family and Carmen's friends, while catching up with relatives and family friends who wanted to hear about her recent assignments and career developments. The conversations had been warm and supportive, reflecting genuine pride in her accomplishments while expressing interest in her experiences and future plans. Marcus had integrated smoothly into family interactions, demonstrating the social skills and cultural sensitivity that made him effective in diplomatic situations. His conversations with Elena's relatives revealed genuine interest in their lives and experiences, while sharing appropriate information about his own work and background. The mutual respect and affection between Elena and Marcus were apparent to everyone, reinforcing family confidence in their relationship while creating positive impressions that would strengthen long-term family bonds. The first indication that the evening might not proceed as smoothly as hoped came during the cocktail hour when Elena noticed Miguel's alcohol consumption increasing beyond moderate levels that would be appropriate for family celebration. His interactions with other guests were becoming more animated and less filtered, including comments about military life and veteran experiences that revealed bitterness and resentment that he usually kept more carefully concealed from family audiences. Elena's attempts to monitor Miguel's behavior without appearing intrusive required careful balance between protective vigilance and respect for his autonomy as a family member. Her military training had taught her to recognize escalating situations while developing intervention strategies that could prevent problems before they reached crisis levels. However, the family setting created constraints on her ability to take direct action without potentially creating the very conflict she was trying to prevent. The situation became more concerning when Miguel began making pointed comments about Elena's military career during conversations with other guests, including suggestions that her success had come at the expense of family relationships and that her deployments had caused unnecessary stress for their parents. These remarks created uncomfortable tension in conversations while forcing other family members to defend Elena's choices and accomplishments in ways that could escalate rather than diffuse growing conflict. Marcus had observed Miguel's behavior with the same analytical attention that characterized his professional assessment of international situations. His experience with cross-cultural negotiations had taught him to recognize signs of brewing conflict while developing strategies for managing volatile personalities in high-stakes environments. His assessment of Miguel's emotional state and potential for escalation aligned with Elena's concerns, while providing additional perspective on intervention options and risk management approaches. The conversation between Elena and Marcus during a brief private moment had confirmed their shared concerns about Miguel's behavior while establishing contingency plans for managing any situations that might arise. Their professional experience with crisis management provided a framework for protecting other family members while minimizing disruption to Carmen's celebration. The decision to maintain heightened awareness while avoiding premature intervention reflected their understanding that effective crisis management required patience and precise timing rather than reactive responses to early warning signs. The dinner service had provided temporary stabilization, as formal seating arrangements separated Miguel from potential sources of conflict, and structured activities focused attention on celebration rather than personal grievances. Elena had been seated at the head table with other immediate family members, while Marcus was positioned nearby with extended family and family friends who appreciated his insights into international affairs and diplomatic experiences. The speeches delivered during dinner had been appropriately celebratory, focusing on Carmen and David's relationship while sharing fond memories and expressing hopes for their future happiness. Elena's own remarks as maid of honor had emphasized her sister's artistic talents and humanitarian commitments while celebrating the strength and compatibility she had observed in her relationship with David. The positive tone and emotional resonance of the speeches had created an atmosphere of love and support that temporarily overshadowed any underlying tensions. Miguel's response to the speeches had been outwardly appropriate, but Elena noticed subtle signs of agitation, including increased fidgeting, frequent alcohol consumption, and facial expressions that suggested internal emotional turmoil.
His applause for Elena's speech had been perfunctory rather than genuinely enthusiastic, confirming her sense that his resentment toward her continued to simmer beneath surface appearances of family solidarity and celebration. The transition from dinner to dancing and evening celebration had created more fluid social environment where conversations could develop more organically and where alcohol consumption would likely continue increasing among guests who were settling in for extended evening of entertainment and socializing. This shift in atmosphere had heightened Elena's concerns about Miguel's potential for creating problems as formal structure gave way to more casual interactions that would be harder to monitor and control. The band's opening selections had successfully encouraged dancing and created festive atmosphere that engaged guests of all ages in celebration activities. Elena had enjoyed several dances with Marcus, appreciating the opportunity for physical closeness and private conversation that had been limited during his deployment. Their connection on the dance floor reflected the deeper intimacy and partnership that characterized their marriage, while providing visible demonstration of their relationship strength to family members and friends. Carmen and David's obvious happiness as they moved through traditional wedding activities had reinforced Elena's determination to protect their celebration from any disruption that Miguel's issues might create. The bride's radiant joy and the groom's devoted attention created perfect celebration atmosphere that deserved protection from family conflicts that had nothing to do with their relationship or their special day. The evening had reached the point where Elena began to relax her vigilance slightly, assuming that Miguel's apparent stability during dinner indicated that her concerns might have been overblown. The positive energy surrounding the celebration and the lack of any significant incidents during the formal portions of the evening had created cautious optimism that family dynamics would remain manageable throughout the remainder of the celebration. However, her military training had taught her that situational awareness required constant attention rather than periodic assessment, and that relaxing vigilance too early often preceded the very problems that careful monitoring was designed to prevent. The shift from formal dinner structure to more casual evening celebration had created new variables that required continued assessment of potential risks and intervention opportunities. The catalyst for the confrontation that would forever change family dynamics came during the band's break, when informal conversations resumed among smaller groups of guests who had moved from their assigned tables to mingle more freely throughout the reception space. Miguel had approached the area where Elena was conversing with several of Carmen's photographer friends about upcoming humanitarian projects that would combine artistic documentation with advocacy for international human rights organizations. The conversation had been engaging and professionally relevant, focusing on the intersection between visual storytelling and policy development in ways that connected Elena's military experience with Carmen's artistic vision. The discussion had attracted several other guests with related professional interests, creating dynamic exchange of ideas and experiences that reflected the intellectual depth and social consciousness that characterized both sisters' career choices and personal values. Miguel's entry into this conversation had initially seemed appropriate as he attempted to contribute perspectives based on his limited military experience and his general interest in international affairs. However, his comments quickly revealed the depth of his resentment toward Elena's success and his perception that her achievements had overshadowed his own potential contributions to similar discussions and professional networks. The specific trigger that caused Miguel's behavior to escalate beyond acceptable boundaries occurred when one of Carmen's colleagues expressed admiration for Elena's recent promotion and her innovative approaches to intelligence analysis that had influenced policy decisions at the highest levels of government. The recognition and respect evident in these comments had apparently intensified Miguel's feelings of inadequacy and resentment to the point where maintaining appropriate family behavior became impossible. Miguel's response had begun with sarcastic comments about military promotions and suggesting that Elena's advancement reflected political correctness rather than genuine merit or exceptional performance. These remarks had created immediate discomfort among the gathered guests, while forcing Elena to choose between defending herself and maintaining the diplomatic restraint that typically characterized her approach to family conflicts. The situation had deteriorated rapidly as Miguel's comments became more personal and more directly attacking Elena's character, her marriage, and her commitment to family relationships. His accusations included suggestions that her military career had been motivated by ego rather than service, that her marriage to Marcus represented calculated networking rather than genuine love, and that her absence during deployments had caused unnecessary hardship for their parents, who worried constantly about her safety. Elena's attempts to redirect the conversation toward more positive topics had been unsuccessful, as Miguel's emotional state had progressed beyond the point where rational discussion was possible. His alcohol consumption throughout the evening had clearly impaired his judgment while intensifying emotional reactions that he typically managed to control during family gatherings. The public setting and audience of Carmen's friends had apparently increased rather than decreased his willingness to express long-suppressed resentments and grievances. The confrontation had escalated to the point where other guests were beginning to notice the tension and move away from what was obviously becoming a family conflict that they preferred not to witness. Elena's concern about protecting Carmen's celebration from disruption had motivated her to suggest that she and Miguel continue their conversation privately, but his emotional state had made him resistant to reasonable suggestions about appropriate time and place for addressing family issues. Marcus had approached during the height of the verbal confrontation, his diplomatic instincts activated by obvious signs of escalating conflict that required intervention before it progressed to more serious levels. His presence had initially seemed to calm the situation, as Miguel generally respected Marcus and appreciated his military background and professional accomplishments. However, Miguel's emotional state had progressed beyond the point where external intervention could easily redirect his behavior toward more appropriate channels. The moment that would define the entire evening occurred when Miguel's frustration with Elena's composed responses to his accusations had driven him to physical action that crossed all boundaries of acceptable family behavior. The slap that connected with Elena's face had been delivered with sufficient force to create audible impact that immediately drew attention from surrounding guests while creating stunned silence that replaced the festive conversation and music that had previously filled the reception space. The shock of physical assault had been compounded by the public setting and the presence of Carmen's friends and professional colleagues who were witnessing family dynamics that Elena had always tried to keep private. The humiliation of being struck by her own brother in front of people whose respect and professional relationships mattered to her created emotional impact that exceeded the physical pain of the blow itself. The silence that followed Miguel's action had lasted only seconds before Marcus's voice cut through the stunned atmosphere with words that would forever change how everyone present understood the dynamics of Elena's marriage and the depth of protection and loyalty that characterized their relationship. His response was immediate, decisive, and delivered with the authority and controlled intensity that reflected his understanding of appropriate consequences for anyone who would dare to assault his wife. The transformation of the celebration from joyful family gathering to dramatic confrontation occurred within moments, but the implications would resonate through family relationships and social connections for years to come. The evening that had begun with such promise and happiness had become the catalyst for revelations about character, loyalty, and respect that would fundamentally alter how everyone involved understood the people they thought they knew and the relationships they had taken for granted. Elena stood in the aftermath of her brother's assault, her cheeks stinging from the blow, while her mind processed the reality that their family dynamics had just changed forever in front of 400 witnesses who would carry this story forward into their respective communities and professional networks.
The celebration of Carmen's marriage had become the stage for a confrontation that would test every relationship and reveal truths about loyalty, respect, and protection that had previously existed only in theoretical understanding rather than practical demonstration. The words that emerged from Marcus Chen's mouth carried the weight of 3 combat deployments and 15 years of State Department negotiations where lives hung in the balance of carefully chosen phrases. His voice maintained the controlled calm that had diffused international crises, but beneath the diplomatic composure lay steel that had been forged in situations where weakness invited catastrophe and respect was earned through demonstrated strength rather than inherited privilege. "Touch my general again, I dare you." The silence that followed Marcus's statement stretched across the reception hall like a physical force, penetrating conversations at distant tables and causing heads to turn toward the source of words that had been delivered with surgical precision and unmistakable authority.
The transformation in atmosphere was immediate and complete, shifting from shocked surprise at Miguel's assault to electric tension as everyone present recognized that the stakes had suddenly escalated beyond simple family conflict into territory where serious consequences awaited any escalation. Miguel's reaction to Marcus's intervention revealed the complex psychology of someone whose self-image depended on projecting strength while operating from a foundation of insecurity and failed expectations. The challenge implicit in Marcus's words had created a crossroads where backing down would confirm his inadequacy in front of witnesses, while advancing would require confronting someone whose capabilities and resolve he could not accurately assess. The alcohol that had fueled his assault on Elena now clouded his judgment about the wisdom of testing boundaries with a man whose professional background included situations where miscalculation could prove fatal. Elena felt the shift in dynamics as Marcus positioned himself between her and Miguel with movements that appeared casual but reflected tactical awareness developed through years of high-stakes international negotiations where physical safety often depended on reading situational cues correctly. His protection was not theatrical or aggressive, but rather demonstrated the quiet confidence of someone who understood conflict escalation patterns and possessed both the skills and authority to manage whatever developments might follow. The reception guests who had witnessed the progression from verbal argument to physical assault now found themselves observing a confrontation that had acquired elements of military discipline and diplomatic consequence that elevated the situation beyond typical family drama. Marcus's professional reputation and Elena's military rank created context that made their response to disrespect a matter of institutional honor rather than merely personal grievance. Carmen appeared at Elena's side within moments, her bride's dress creating stark visual contrast with the tension that had enveloped her wedding celebration. The concern in her eyes reflected not only immediate worry about Elena's physical condition, but also growing understanding that her wedding had become the stage for revelations about family dynamics that would affect relationships for years to come. Her approach demonstrated remarkable composure, given that her most important day had been disrupted by violence that threatened to overshadow the joy and significance of her marriage to David. David Torres followed closely behind his new wife, his medical training activated by the obvious signs of escalating conflict that could result in injuries requiring professional intervention. His assessment of the situation reflected both personal concern for family members and clinical evaluation of behavioral patterns that suggested potential for additional violence if appropriate de-escalation techniques were not employed immediately. His position as outsider to long-standing family conflicts provided perspective that might prove valuable for managing resolution. The convergence of immediate family members around the confrontation created natural audience for whatever resolution would emerge from Marcus's challenge. Their presence added layers of accountability and consequence that would influence how all parties chose to respond to the escalating situation. The public nature of the conflict meant that any resolution would be witnessed and remembered by people whose opinions and relationships mattered to everyone involved. Miguel's internal struggle was visible through facial expressions and body language that revealed the war between ego and self-preservation that characterized his response to Marcus's challenge. His military background provided enough understanding of hierarchy and consequence to recognize that challenging a State Department official with security clearance and combat experience would involve risks that extended far beyond immediate physical confrontation. However, his emotional state and alcohol consumption had compromised his ability to make rational assessments about appropriate responses to provocation. The broader audience of wedding guests had organized themselves into concentric circles around the central confrontation, with family members and close friends positioned nearest to the participants, while more distant acquaintances maintained respectful distance that allowed observation without direct involvement. The social dynamics reflected instinctive understanding that they were witnessing events that would have lasting consequences for everyone present, creating collective awareness that appropriate responses required careful consideration of relationships and reputations that could be affected by their reactions. Marcus's professional experience with international conflict had taught him that effective deterrence required demonstrating both capability and resolve, while providing clear pathways for de-escalation that allowed opponents to retreat without losing face entirely. His challenge to Miguel had been calibrated to establish boundaries while offering implicit opportunity for withdrawal if reasonable judgment prevailed over emotional reaction. The diplomatic precision of his intervention reflected years of managing volatile situations where miscommunication could have catastrophic consequences. Elena's response to Marcus's protection revealed the depth of their partnership and her trust in his judgment during crisis situations. Her military training had prepared her to handle physical confrontation independently, but her appreciation for Marcus's intervention reflected understanding that his involvement transformed the situation from personal family conflict into demonstration of institutional respect and professional consequence that would carry weight beyond immediate circumstances. The wedding venue staff had begun responding to the obvious tension with professional discretion that reflected their experience managing events where family conflicts sometimes disrupt celebrations. Their approach focused on maintaining appropriate distance while ensuring security measures were available if escalation continued beyond verbal confrontation. The event coordinator's assessment of the situation demonstrated understanding that family conflicts could sometimes require intervention to protect other guests and preserve the celebration's integrity. Miguel's delayed response to Marcus's challenge reflected internal calculation about consequences and options that his impaired judgment made difficult to process accurately. His military experience provided framework for understanding that backing down from direct challenge could be interpreted as cowardice, while advancing could result in confrontation with someone whose capabilities and connections he could not accurately assess. The complexity of the decision created hesitation while tension was building to see how the confrontation would resolve. The physical evidence of Miguel's assault remained visible on Elena's face, providing a constant reminder of the violation that had precipitated Marcus's intervention. The red mark on her cheek served as focal point for family members and guests who struggled to reconcile the violence they had witnessed with their previous understanding of family relationships and appropriate behavior during celebrations. The visible injury created moral clarity that simplified judgments about accountability and appropriate responses. Marcus's professional reputation and Elena's military rank created context that made their response to disrespect a matter of institutional honor rather than merely personal grievance. Carmen appeared at Elena's side within moments, her bride's dress creating stark visual contrast with the tension that had enveloped her wedding celebration. The concern in her eyes reflected not only immediate worry about Elena's physical condition, but also growing understanding that her wedding had become the stage for revelations about family dynamics that would affect relationships for years to come. Her approach demonstrated remarkable composure given that her most important day had been disrupted by violence that threatened to overshadow the joy and significance of her marriage to David. David Torres followed closely behind his new wife, his medical training activated by the obvious signs of escalating conflict that could result in injuries requiring professional intervention. His assessment of the situation reflected both personal concern for family members and clinical evaluation of behavioral patterns that suggested potential for additional violence if appropriate de-escalation techniques were not employed immediately. His position as outsider to long-standing family conflicts provided perspective that might prove valuable for managing resolution. The convergence of immediate family members around the confrontation created natural audience for whatever resolution would emerge from Marcus's challenge to Miguel. Their presence added layers of accountability and consequence that would influence how all parties chose to respond to the escalating situation. The public nature of the conflict meant that any resolution would be witnessed and remembered by people whose opinions and relationships mattered to everyone involved. Miguel's internal struggle was visible through facial expressions and body language that revealed the war between ego and self-preservation that characterized his response to Marcus's challenge. His military background provided enough understanding of hierarchy and consequence to recognize that challenging a State Department official with security clearance and combat experience would involve risks that extended far beyond immediate physical confrontation. However, his emotional state and alcohol consumption had compromised his ability to make rational assessments about appropriate responses to provocation. The broader audience of wedding guests had organized themselves into concentric circles around the central confrontation, with family members and close friends positioned nearest to the participants, while more distant acquaintances maintained respect.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Carmen's emotional state reflected the collision between her desire to protect family relationships and her recognition that Miguel's behavior had crossed boundaries that required consequences. Her position as bride, whose celebration had been disrupted, created unique perspective on the situation, while generating conflicting loyalties between siblings whose conflict was threatening to define her wedding day. Her obvious distress motivated family members to seek rapid resolution that could minimize additional trauma while ensuring appropriate accountability. The extended family members presented at the reception included aunts, uncles, and cousins, whose relationships with both Elena and Miguel created complex loyalties that would influence their responses to the confrontation. Their reactions would determine community understanding of the incident while affecting long-term family dynamics that extended beyond immediate participants. The generational differences in their perspectives added layers of complexity to judgments about appropriate responses and consequences. Marcus's background check and security clearance process had included psychological evaluation and stress testing that qualified him to assess Miguel's mental state and potential for escalation. His professional experience with unstable personalities in high-stakes environments provided framework for managing confrontation while minimizing risk to innocent parties. The analytical approach he brought to personal conflict reflected skills developed through years of international crisis management, where miscalculation could have strategic consequences. The transformation of wedding celebration into family crisis had created a situation where immediate decisions would have lasting implications for relationships and reputations that had been built over decades. The public nature of the confrontation meant that resolution would be observed and judged by community members, whose opinions would influence social standing and professional relationships for everyone involved. The stakes had elevated beyond personal conflict into territory where institutional honor and community respect were at risk. Elena's military rank and Marcus's diplomatic position created context where disrespect toward them represented challenge to institutions and values that extended beyond personal relationships. Miguel's assault had therefore acquired significance that transcended family conflict to encompass questions about respect for service and recognition of sacrifice that military families made for national security. The broader implications of the confrontation would influence how community leaders and professional associates evaluated character and judgment of all participants. The silence that continued to envelop the reception hall reflected collective understanding that they were witnessing a pivotal moment that would define relationships and establish precedents for future interactions. The weight of decision about how to respond to Marcus's challenge had created suspended animation, where everyone waited to see whether wisdom or pride would determine Miguel's next action. The outcome would establish patterns of accountability and consequence that would influence family dynamics for generations. Miguel's military training had included instruction about chain of command and appropriate responses to authority that created framework for understanding Marcus's position and the implications of challenging someone with higher rank and greater experience. However, his emotional state and sense of grievance had compromised his ability to apply rational analysis to assessment of consequences. The internal conflict between training and emotion was visible through his hesitation and obvious struggle to determine appropriate response. The photographic documentation of the wedding had been interrupted by the confrontation, creating gap in visual record that would forever mark Carmen's celebration with reminder of family conflict that had disrupted her most important day. The professional photographer's response to the situation demonstrated understanding that some moments required discretion rather than documentation, respecting family privacy while preserving memories of celebration that preceded the conflict. Marcus's diplomatic training had included extensive preparation for managing confrontations where cultural differences and personal pride could escalate minor disagreements into international incidents. His approach to Miguel reflected application of these skills to family context while maintaining professional standards that had been developed through years of representing American interests in volatile environments. The precision of his intervention demonstrated competence that had been proven in situations where miscalculation could affect national security. The medical professional perspective provided by David Torres included recognition that alcohol impairment had compromised Miguel's judgment while intensifying emotional reactions that might not reflect his typical behavioral patterns. His assessment of the situation incorporated understanding of substance abuse effects on decision-making capacity while evaluating potential for violence that might require medical intervention.
His position as medical professional created responsibility for protecting vulnerable parties while promoting resolution that minimized harm. Elena's forensic training had taught her to document evidence and preserve chain of custody for potential legal proceedings that might result from criminal assault charges. Her professional approach to managing personal crisis reflected years of training that emphasized objectivity and systematic analysis even during emotional circumstances. The venue's security protocols included procedures for managing disturbances that threatened guest safety or event integrity. The staff's response to escalating family conflict demonstrated professional competence while respecting family privacy and maintaining discretion that protected all parties from unnecessary exposure. Their readiness to intervene if necessary provided backup support that allowed family members to focus on resolution rather than crowd control or safety management. Miguel's response to the continued pressure of Marcus's challenge began manifesting through physical symptoms that reflected internal stress and decision-making paralysis. His obvious struggle to formulate appropriate response created additional tension while providing time for rational consideration that might prevent further escalation. The delayed reaction suggested that some part of his judgment recognized the seriousness of the situation despite emotional impairment from alcohol consumption. The community leaders present at the reception included business executives, elected officials, and social organization heads, whose reactions would influence broader community understanding of the incident. Their assessment of character and judgment displayed by all participants would affect professional relationships and social standing that extended far beyond the family circle.
Carmen's photographer friends who had witnessed the confrontation brought professional perspective on conflict documentation while understanding ethical considerations about privacy and consent that govern their potential responses to family crisis. Their training in humanitarian photography provided framework for evaluating appropriate boundaries between documentation and intervention when witnessing violence or distress. Their presence created additional complexity regarding potential media attention that might result from the incident. The State Department connections that Marcus maintained included colleagues and supervisors whose assessment of his judgment and character could affect his career advancement and security clearance maintenance. His handling of personal crisis would be evaluated as indicator of his capacity for managing pressure and maintaining professional standards under stress. The intersection of personal and professional obligations created additional complexity for his response to Miguel's challenge. Elena's military chain of command included superior officers whose confidence in her leadership and judgment affected her promotion prospects and assignment opportunities. Her response to family crisis would be evaluated as indicator of her ability to maintain composure and make sound decisions under pressure. The professional implications of personal conduct created additional motivation for handling the situation in ways that reflected military values and institutional honor. The legal implications of Miguel's assault included potential criminal charges for battery that could result in prosecution regardless of family wishes about pursuing formal complaints. The public nature of the incident and number of witnesses created evidence that might support criminal proceedings even without victim cooperation. The legal framework surrounding domestic violence and assault provided structure for potential consequences that extended beyond family resolution. Miguel's veteran status created potential for additional consequences through Veterans Affairs channels if criminal charges were filed or if his behavior indicated mental health issues requiring intervention. His military service record could be affected by civilian legal proceedings while creating opportunity for treatment and support services designed specifically for veterans struggling with transition issues. The intersection of military and civilian accountability systems created complex framework for addressing behavioral problems. The wedding vendor contracts included provisions for managing disruptions that threatened event success or guest safety. The venue's liability insurance and standard procedures provided framework for documenting incidents while protecting all parties from financial responsibility for damages that might result from guest misconduct. The business implications of family conflict created additional motivation for rapid resolution that preserves celebration integrity. Marcus's challenge had created a decisive moment where Miguel's response would determine whether the confrontation escalated into physical violence or resolved through demonstration of appropriate respect and accountability. The choice between wisdom and pride would reveal character while establishing precedent for future family interactions.
The weight of decision had created suspended tension that affected everyone present while determining trajectory for relationships that had been built over decades of shared history and mutual support. The transformation of celebration into crisis had demonstrated how quickly family dynamics could shift from harmony to conflict when underlying tensions encountered triggering events. The public nature of the revelation provided lessons about accountability and consequence that would influence behavior patterns and relationship expectations for everyone who witnessed the confrontation. The experience would become reference point for understanding character and judgment that would affect interactions and trust levels for years to come. Elena stood surrounded by family and friends while processing the reality that her brother's assault had created permanent change in relationships that could not be repaired through simple apology or time passage. The protection demonstrated by Marcus had revealed depths of loyalty and commitment that strengthened their marriage while exposing family dysfunction that would require extensive work to address. The evening that had begun with celebration had become catalyst for truth-telling and accountability that would test every relationship while establishing new standards for respect and behavior within their family system. Miguel's decision crystallized in the space between heartbeats, his alcohol-clouded judgment finally penetrating the fog of resentment to recognize the futility of challenging someone whose capabilities and connections operated in realms far beyond his understanding. The visible tremor in his hands betrayed the internal collapse of bravado as reality imposed itself on fantasy, forcing acknowledgement that his assault on Elena had crossed boundaries that would demand consequences, regardless of his willingness to accept them. The step backward that Miguel took represented more than physical retreat from confrontation. It marked the moment when years of accumulated grievance and self-pity encountered immovable reality in the form of Marcus's quiet authority and Elena's institutional protection. The movement created visible relief among wedding guests who had been holding collective breath while waiting to see whether violence would escalate or wisdom would prevail in the face of decisive challenge. Marcus's response to Miguel's retreat demonstrated the diplomatic precision that had made him invaluable in international negotiations, where face-saving measures could prevent minor disputes from becoming major crises. His acknowledgement of Miguel's withdrawal was subtle enough to preserve dignity, while unmistakable enough to establish that respect had been restored and boundaries clarified. The professional grace he displayed in victory reflected understanding that humiliation often created more problems than resolution. "Smart choice," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying just enough volume for immediate family to hear while avoiding the public humiliation that could have driven Miguel toward desperate escalation. The words contained recognition of Miguel's decision to step back while reinforcing the lesson about consequences that would govern future interactions. The diplomatic approach reflected years of experience managing volatile personalities without creating additional enemies or unresolvable conflicts. Elena felt the tension drain from her shoulders as she witnessed Miguel's retreat, though the emotional aftermath of his assault continued reverberating through her nervous system. Her military training had prepared her for physical confrontation, but the betrayal by a family member created a different category of trauma that would require time and professional support to process completely. The protection Marcus had provided demonstrated partnership strength that would help her navigate the complex emotions surrounding family dysfunction and personal violation.
Carmen approached Elena with tears streaming down her face, her wedding dress creating surreal contrast with the emotional devastation that had transformed her celebration into family crisis. Her embrace conveyed years of sisterly love, while acknowledging that their relationship with Miguel had been permanently altered by his choices. The bride's composure under impossible circumstances demonstrated maturity that would serve her well in navigating the family dynamics that would emerge from this confrontation. "I'm so sorry this happened on your wedding day," Elena whispered to her sister, her voice carrying guilt about the disruption, despite having done nothing to provoke Miguel's assault. The protective instincts that had always characterized their sisterly relationship made Elena feel responsible for problems she had not created, while wishing she could have prevented the conflict that had overshadowed Carmen's most important celebration. Carmen's response revealed the wisdom and perspective that had always made her exceptional among their siblings. "This isn't your fault, Elena. Miguel made his choice, and now we all have to live with the consequences.
What matters is that Marcus showed everyone who you really are to him, and that Miguel finally showed everyone who he really is to us. The clarity of her analysis demonstrated understanding that family relationships required honesty about character and behavior rather than endless accommodation of dysfunction. David Torres had been observing the confrontation with clinical detachment that allowed him to assess the medical and psychological implications of what had transpired. His approach to family conflict reflected training in emergency medicine, where rapid assessment and appropriate intervention could mean the difference between recovery and permanent damage. His evaluation of Miguel's condition included recognition that alcohol abuse and underlying mental health issues required professional attention rather than family management. "Miguel needs professional help," David said quietly to the assembled family members, his medical opinion delivered with authority that commanded attention. What we witnessed tonight isn't just about family conflict or sibling rivalry. His behavior indicates substance abuse issues and possibly underlying mental health conditions that require intervention from qualified professionals. Continuing to enable this pattern will only lead to escalation and more serious consequences. The medical perspective provided framework for understanding Miguel's behavior that moved beyond moral judgment toward clinical assessment and treatment recommendations. David's professional training created obligation to identify health issues while protecting vulnerable family members from continued exposure to dangerous behavior. His willingness to provide difficult but necessary feedback demonstrated the kind of honest communication that would be required for addressing family dysfunction. Marcus's diplomatic background included extensive training in post-crisis management and relationship repair that would prove valuable for navigating the complex aftermath of family confrontation. His experience with conflict resolution provided perspective on rebuilding trust and establishing new boundaries that could preserve important relationships while protecting vulnerable parties from additional harm. The approach he would take to family healing reflected professional competence in managing sensitive situations. The wedding guests who had witnessed the confrontation began processing their own responses to family violence and institutional protection that had unfolded before them. Their reactions would determine community understanding of the incident while influencing social consequences that would affect all participants. The diversity of perspectives represented among the witnesses ensured comprehensive evaluation of character and judgment that would shape future relationships and opportunities. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, one of Elena's military colleagues who had attended the wedding with his wife, approached the family group with expression that combined personal concern with professional assessment of leadership under pressure. His observation of Elena's composure during crisis and Marcus's effective intervention provided military perspective on character and capability that would influence their professional reputations within defense and diplomatic communities. "Colonel Vasquez, your bearing under assault was exemplary," Morrison said formally, his words carrying weight within military culture where honor and respect formed foundation of institutional relationships. "And Mr. Chen, your protection of a fellow service member demonstrates the kind of character and judgment that makes diplomatic service possible. Miguel's behavior reflects poorly only on himself, not on the family that has produced two such distinguished professionals." The military validation provided by Morrison's assessment created official recognition that Elena's response to family crisis had met professional standards, while Marcus's intervention had demonstrated appropriate action for protecting institutional honor. The formal acknowledgement would influence military and diplomatic communities' understanding of their character while providing foundation for continued career advancement despite family scandal. Isabella Martinez, Carmen's photography mentor who had traveled from Colombia to attend the wedding, provided international perspective on family conflict and institutional protection that reflected different cultural expectations about loyalty and accountability. Her experience documenting human rights violations had taught her to recognize abuse patterns while understanding the courage required to stand up to family members who violated basic standards of respect and dignity. "In my country, we have saying about family that translates roughly to blood relations don't excuse blood crimes," Isabella explained to the gathered group. "What Miguel did tonight was assault, regardless of family relationship. What Marcus did was protection, which is what family should provide.
Elena, you have nothing to apologize for and everything to be proud of in choosing partner who understands difference between enabling abuse and preventing it. The international perspective provided validation that transcended cultural boundaries while reinforcing universal principles about protection and accountability that govern civilized relationships.
Isabella's professional experience with conflict documentation created credibility that influenced understanding of appropriate responses to violence and disrespect. Her willingness to speak truth about family dysfunction demonstrated courage that encouraged others to acknowledge reality rather than maintain convenient fictions. Dr. Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister, who worked as clinical psychologist specializing in family therapy, had observed the confrontation with professional interest in dynamics that had created space for violence within family celebration. Her assessment of behavioral patterns and intervention strategies would prove valuable for addressing underlying issues that had contributed to Miguel's assault while protecting family members from continued exposure to destructive behavior. Family systems often develop patterns that enable dysfunction while discouraging accountability. Dr. Chen explained to family members who were struggling to understand how their relationships had deteriorated to point of public violence. Miguel's behavior tonight represents escalation of long-standing issues that have been accommodated rather than addressed. Recovery will require establishing firm boundaries and consistent consequences rather than continuing to hope that unconditional support will somehow inspire better choices. The clinical perspective provided framework for understanding family dysfunction while offering hope for healing through appropriate intervention and boundary setting. Dr. Chen's professional expertise created opportunity for family members to access evidence-based strategies for managing relationships with individuals whose behavior patterns included manipulation, emotional abuse, and potential violence. Her availability as resource for family therapy demonstrated immediate pathway toward addressing systemic issues. Elena's parents arrived at the reception venue within 30 minutes of receiving Carmen's emergency phone call, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and fear about consequences of their son's public assault on their daughter. Their response to family crisis would determine whether healing was possible or whether permanent divisions would characterize future relationships. The choices they made about accountability and support would influence all family members' willingness to maintain connections. Maria Elena Vasquez, Elena's mother, approached her daughter with tears and apologies that reflected genuine remorse about Miguel's behavior while revealing years of accumulated guilt about enabling his dysfunction through excessive accommodation and financial support. Her recognition that protection and accountability served family interests better than endless tolerance marked potential turning point in family dynamics that had previously prioritized harmony over honesty. "Mija, I am so sorry about what Miguel did to you," Maria Elena said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We have been making excuses for his behavior for too long, and tonight he showed us what happens when we don't demand respect and responsibility. Marcus, thank you for protecting our daughter when we failed to protect her from her own brother. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." The parental acknowledgement of failure and gratitude for Marcus's protection created foundation for family healing while establishing new standards for acceptable behavior within their relationships. Maria Elena Vasquez, Elena's mother, approached her daughter with tears and apologies that reflected genuine remorse about Miguel's behavior, while revealing years of accumulated guilt about enabling his dysfunction through excessive accommodation and financial support. Her recognition that protection and accountability served family interests better than endless tolerance marked potential turning point in family dynamics that had previously prioritized harmony over honesty. "Mija, I am so sorry about what Miguel did to you," Maria Elena said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We have been making excuses for his behavior for too long, and tonight he showed us what happens when we don't demand respect and responsibility. Marcus, thank you for protecting our daughter when we failed to protect her from her own brother. We owe you debt that can never be repaid." The parental acknowledgement of failure and gratitude for Marcus's protection created foundation for family healing while establishing new standards for acceptable behavior within their relationships. Maria Elena's willingness to accept responsibility for enabling Miguel's dysfunction demonstrated courage that would be required for implementing changes necessary to prevent future incidents.
Her recognition of debt to Marcus reflected understanding that family protection sometimes required outside intervention. Roberto Vasquez, Elena's father, struggled with conflicting emotions about his son's behavior and his obligation to protect all his children from violence and disrespect. His military background provided framework for understanding hierarchy and consequence, while his paternal instincts created resistance to accepting that his son required formal intervention rather than family management. The internal conflict reflected broader challenges faced by families dealing with addiction and mental health issues. "Miguel crossed lines tonight that can't be uncrossed," Roberto said quietly, his words carrying weight of military experience with discipline and accountability. "As his father, I love him and want to help him, but as Elena's father and former Marine, I understand that respect must be earned and maintained through appropriate behavior. What Marcus did tonight was protect my daughter when I wasn't there to do it myself. That makes him family in ways that genetics alone cannot create." The paternal blessing of Marcus's intervention provided validation that transcended immediate crisis to establish permanent recognition of his role as Elena's protector and advocate. Roberto's military perspective created understanding that family loyalty required accountability rather than unconditional tolerance of destructive behavior. His acknowledgement of debt to Marcus reflected values that would guide future family relationships and expectations. Miguel's absence from family reconciliation conversations reflected his decision to leave the wedding venue immediately after his confrontation with Marcus, avoiding accountability while creating additional problems through abandonment of responsibility for consequences of his actions. His departure demonstrated continued pattern of avoiding difficult conversations while expecting others to manage aftermath of his behavioral choices. The avoidance would complicate family healing while requiring intervention strategies that addressed resistance to treatment and accountability. Carmen's decision to continue her wedding celebration despite family crisis demonstrated remarkable resilience and perspective that honored her commitment to David while refusing to allow Miguel's dysfunction to define her most important day. Her choice to proceed with planned activities sent clear message about priorities and boundaries that would guide future family interactions. The celebration that resumed after family conversations would be different in tone, but authentic in its recognition of love and commitment that transcended conflict.
The band's resumption of music created opportunity for guests to process their emotions through dancing and conversation, while allowing family members to experience joy and connection despite preceding trauma. The resilience demonstrated by wedding celebration reflected community understanding that life must continue despite individual failures and that love and commitment deserved celebration regardless of surrounding challenges. The contrast between family dysfunction and marital harmony provided lessons about choosing partners and building relationships. Marcus's invitation for Elena to dance created opportunity for private conversation while demonstrating to wedding guests that their relationship remained strong and affectionate despite family crisis. Their movement together on dance floor provided visual representation of partnership that had weathered challenge while emerging stronger through mutual support and protection. The intimacy they shared in public created powerful message about marriage as refuge from family dysfunction. "How are you feeling about everything that happened tonight?" Marcus asked quietly as they moved together, his concern focused on Elena's emotional processing rather than his own satisfaction with effective intervention. The question reflected understanding that trauma recovery required time and support rather than simple resolution of immediate threat. His attention to her needs demonstrated partnership qualities that had attracted Elena initially and would sustain their marriage through future challenges. Elena's response revealed complex emotions about family betrayal and marital protection that would require ongoing conversation and professional support to process completely. "I'm grateful for what you did, and I'm devastated that it was necessary," she said honestly. "Miguel has been struggling for years, but I never thought he would actually hit me, especially not in public. Your response showed everyone what marriage partnership really means, but it also showed everyone what my family really is beneath the surface." The honesty of Elena's emotional processing reflected trust in Marcus while acknowledging reality of family dysfunction that could no longer be hidden or minimized. Her gratitude for protection, combined with grief about family relationships, created complex emotional landscape that would require careful navigation.
The recognition that public exposure had revealed truth about family dynamics provided foundation for making informed decisions about future relationships and boundaries. David's conversation with Carmen during their own private dance reflected medical perspective on family crisis management while expressing commitment to supporting her through difficult healing process that would affect their early marriage. His professional understanding of trauma and family systems provided framework for addressing challenges while maintaining focus on their relationship priorities. The early test of their partnership demonstrated strength that would serve them well throughout their marriage. "Tonight showed me how strong you are and how much your sister means to you," David said to Carmen as they danced. "It also showed me what kind of man Marcus is and why Elena chose him. We're going to be dealing with family issues for a while, but we'll face them together, and we'll make sure our own relationship stays healthy despite whatever dysfunction exists around us." The commitment to protecting their marriage from family dysfunction while supporting Elena through recovery demonstrated maturity and wisdom that would characterize their approach to extended family relationships. David's medical perspective provided valuable framework for understanding trauma and healing, while his personal commitment to Carmen created foundation for navigating complex family dynamics. Their partnership would provide model for healthy relationships within a family system that have been damaged by Miguel's choices. Elena's military colleagues who had attended the wedding began conversations about institutional support and resources available for family crisis management while expressing confidence in her continued leadership despite personal challenges. Their professional perspective provided validation that family dysfunction did not reflect on Elena's character while offering practical assistance for managing potential impacts on her career and security clearance. The institutional support demonstrated military communities' commitment to protecting members from personal attacks. The formal documentation of Miguel's assault included witness statements from multiple guests whose professional credibility would support any legal proceedings that might be necessary for ensuring accountability and protection. The evidence gathering reflected understanding that criminal behavior required official response, regardless of family preferences about avoiding publicity or legal consequences. The documentation process provided foundation for restraining orders or other legal protections that might be needed. Carmen's photographer friends, who had witnessed the confrontation, offered to provide professional documentation of Miguel's assault if legal proceedings required evidence of his behavior and its impact on family relationships. Their willingness to testify reflected understanding that abuse required community response rather than family tolerance. The professional support created additional resources for ensuring accountability while protecting Elena from future violence. The venue's security footage provided objective documentation of assault and protective intervention that would support any legal proceedings while eliminating questions about accuracy of witness testimony. The video evidence created permanent record of Miguel's choices and Marcus's response that would influence legal and social consequences. The documentation reflected modern reality that public behavior carried permanent consequences through digital recording and social media sharing. Elena's decision about pressing formal charges against Miguel would determine whether his assault faced legal consequences or remained within family management system that had previously enabled his dysfunction. The choice between criminal prosecution and family intervention reflected broader questions about accountability and protection that would influence future family relationships. The legal options provided framework for ensuring consequences while protecting Elena from additional violence.
Marcus's State Department colleagues who learned about the incident through professional networks expressed support for his intervention while conducting informal assessment of his judgment and character under pressure. Their evaluation would influence his career prospects while providing validation that his response had met professional standards for protecting family members from assault. The diplomatic community's support demonstrated understanding that personal integrity affected professional credibility. The international implications of Marcus's family situation included security clearance reviews that would evaluate potential vulnerabilities created by family dysfunction and criminal behavior. His handling of personal crisis would be assessed as indicator of his ability to manage pressure while maintaining appropriate judgment about classified information and international relationships. The professional consequences created additional stakes for managing family relationships appropriately. Elena's promotion prospects within military hierarchy would be influenced by her response to family crisis and her ability to maintain professional focus despite personal challenges. Her handling of public assault and family dysfunction would be evaluated as indicator of leadership capability and emotional resilience under pressure. The institutional assessment provided additional motivation for addressing family issues professionally rather than allowing dysfunction to affect career advancement. The professional consequences created additional stakes for managing family relationships appropriately. Elena's promotion prospects within military hierarchy would be influenced by her response to family crisis and her ability to maintain professional focus despite personal challenges. Her handling of public assault and family dysfunction would be evaluated as indicator of leadership capability and emotional resilience under pressure. The institutional assessment provided additional motivation for addressing family issues professionally rather than allowing dysfunction to affect career advancement. The charitable organizations where Elena and Marcus served on boards would evaluate their continued involvement based on potential scandal and media attention that might affect organizational reputation and fundraising effectiveness. Their response to family crisis would influence community confidence in their judgment while determining future leadership opportunities. The social consequences created additional complexity for managing personal relationships within public roles. Carmen's photography career faced potential impact from family scandal that might affect client confidence and international assignments that required cultural sensitivity and professional discretion. Her association with family violence could influence opportunities while creating need for reputation management and professional distance from dysfunction. The career implications provided additional motivation for establishing clear boundaries and accountability measures. The media attention that inevitably followed public assault at high-profile wedding created need for professional communication strategy that would protect family privacy while ensuring accurate reporting of events. The public relations challenges required careful balance between transparency and discretion that would influence long-term reputation and relationship outcomes. The media management reflected modern reality that personal events carried public consequences through social networking and news coverage. Elena's therapy sessions following the assault provided professional framework for processing trauma while developing strategies for managing family relationships that included potential for violence and continued dysfunction. The clinical support created opportunity for healing while building resilience that would enable her to maintain professional effectiveness despite personal challenges. The therapeutic intervention demonstrated commitment to recovery that would influence family dynamics and future relationships. Marcus's counseling focused on processing his protective response while exploring cultural and professional factors that had influenced his intervention strategy. The therapeutic support provided opportunity for examining motivations and consequences while developing skills for managing future family conflicts. The professional guidance demonstrated commitment to understanding personal responses while maintaining effectiveness in diplomatic roles that required cultural sensitivity and conflict management. The family therapy sessions that included Elena's parents addressed systemic issues that had enabled Miguel's dysfunction while developing strategies for establishing healthy boundaries and accountability measures. The clinical intervention provided framework for changing relationship patterns while protecting vulnerable family members from continued exposure to destructive behavior. The therapeutic approach demonstrated commitment to healing that extended beyond immediate crisis to address underlying family dynamics. Miguel's court-ordered evaluation and treatment following criminal charges provided professional assessment of his mental health and substance abuse issues while establishing requirements for behavior modification and ongoing supervision. The legal intervention created accountability that family accommodation had failed to provide while offering resources for addressing underlying problems. The court system's involvement demonstrated community commitment to protection and rehabilitation rather than simple punishment. The restraining order that Elena obtained against Miguel provided legal protection while establishing clear consequences for future contact or harassment attempts. The formal boundary setting reflected understanding that family relationships require respect and safety rather than unlimited tolerance of destructive behavior. The legal protection created framework for maintaining relationships with other family members while ensuring personal security. Elena's return to military duties following family crisis demonstrated resilience and professional commitment that enhanced her reputation within institutional hierarchy while providing stability during emotional recovery. Her ability to maintain effectiveness despite personal trauma reflected character and training that qualified her for increased responsibility and leadership opportunities. The professional continuity provided foundation for healing while demonstrating that family dysfunction did not define personal capability. Marcus's successful completion of diplomatic assignments despite family challenges demonstrated professional competence while providing validation that personal crisis had not compromised his effectiveness in international roles.
His ability to manage complex negotiations while processing family trauma reflected skills and character that enhanced his value to State Department operations. The professional success provided stability during personal healing while demonstrating institutional confidence in his judgment. Carmen and David's first year of marriage included ongoing support for Elena while establishing their own relationship boundaries that protected their partnership from family dysfunction while maintaining appropriate loyalty and assistance. Their approach to extended family relationships provided model for healthy marriage within complex family system while demonstrating commitment to mutual support and protection.
The early marriage navigation created foundation for long-term success despite surrounding challenges. Elena's promotion to full colonel 18 months after the wedding reflected military confidence in her leadership and character despite family challenges, while providing recognition that personal trauma had been overcome through appropriate professional and therapeutic support. The career advancement demonstrated institutional commitment to protecting valuable officers from personal attacks while rewarding resilience and continued effectiveness. The promotion created opportunity for increased influence and responsibility within military hierarchy. Marcus's assignment to senior diplomatic position in Southeast Asia provided opportunity for career advancement while creating geographic distance from family dysfunction that would enable continued healing and relationship development. The professional recognition reflected State Department confidence in his judgment and capabilities while providing fresh start for building institutional relationships without family complications. The assignment created platform for enhanced influence within international diplomatic community. The birth of Elena and Marcus's first child 2 years after the wedding created new priorities and responsibilities that strengthened their marriage while providing motivation for maintaining healthy family boundaries that would protect their own children from dysfunction and violence. The parental role created additional perspective on family relationships while reinforcing commitment to creating safe and nurturing environment for future generations. The family expansion demonstrated recovery from trauma while building positive legacy. Miguel's completion of court-ordered treatment and gradual rebuilding of family relationships under supervised conditions provided hope for eventual reconciliation while maintaining protective boundaries that ensured accountability and safety. His recognition of responsibility for assault and commitment to behavior modification created foundation for possible future relationship repair. The healing process demonstrated that accountability and consequence could serve rehabilitation rather than simple punishment when combined with appropriate therapeutic intervention and family support. The annual family gatherings that resumed 3 years after the wedding included new protocols and boundaries that protected all family members while allowing celebration of positive relationships and achievements. The modified family dynamics reflected learning from crisis while demonstrating commitment to maintaining connections that served everyone's interests rather than accommodating dysfunction. The evolved relationships provided model for healthy family interaction that prioritized respect and safety while preserving love and support. Elena's speaking engagements at military conferences about family crisis management and institutional support provided opportunity to share lessons learned while helping other service members navigate personal challenges without compromising professional effectiveness. Her willingness to discuss family trauma publicly demonstrated recovery while providing valuable resources for military community. The advocacy work created positive legacy from negative experience while strengthening her reputation as leader who could overcome adversity. Marcus's expertise in conflict resolution and cultural sensitivity that had been demonstrated through family crisis management enhanced his diplomatic effectiveness while providing model for colleagues facing similar challenges. His approach to protecting family members while maintaining professional standards created best practices that influenced State Department training and support programs. The professional development demonstrated how personal experience could enhance rather than compromise institutional effectiveness. The wedding anniversary celebrations that Elena and Marcus shared provided annual opportunity to reflect on growth and resilience that had characterized their marriage, while honoring the protection and partnership that had emerged from crisis. Their relationship strength provided foundation for continued service while demonstrating that love and commitment could overcome family dysfunction and external challenges. The annual tradition created positive ritual that reinforced their bond while acknowledging journey they had traveled together.
Carmen's photography exhibitions that included documentation of family healing and resilience provided artistic expression of recovery while creating public awareness about domestic violence and family accountability. Her visual storytelling demonstrated how crisis could become catalyst for positive change while providing inspiration for other families facing similar challenges. The artistic work created meaningful legacy from traumatic experience while contributing to social understanding of family violence and recovery. The confrontation that erupted at Lieutenant Colonel Sofia Martinez's sister's wedding would become a defining moment that illustrated the profound difference between protective loyalty and enabling dysfunction within military families. The incident, which began with what appeared to be typical sibling tension, escalated into a public demonstration of respect, accountability, and the unwavering protection that characterizes authentic partnerships forged through shared service and mutual understanding of sacrifice. Sofia had spent the morning of her sister Isabella's wedding managing the complex logistics that always accompanied large family celebrations. Her organizational skills honed through years of military operations, where attention to detail could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. As a decorated intelligence officer who had served 3 tours in volatile regions, she approached family responsibilities with the same systematic precision that had earned her rapid promotion through the ranks, while maintaining the respect of subordinates and superiors alike. The Martinez family had gathered at the historic Riverside Manor to celebrate Isabella's marriage to Dr. James Richardson, a prominent neurosurgeon whose dedication to treating combat veterans had earned him recognition within both medical and military communities. The union represented more than romantic partnership. It symbolized the convergence of 2 families deeply committed to service, sacrifice, and the values that sustained both military readiness and civilian society during challenging times. Sofia's husband, Captain Ryan Thompson, had returned from a classified deployment in Eastern Europe just 48 hours before the wedding, his presence representing not only personal reunion, but also professional partnership that had been tested through separation, security requirements, and the unique pressures that governed dual military marriages. Their relationship had been forged in the crucible of shared service, mutual respect, and understanding that duty sometimes required personal sacrifice, while strengthening rather than weakening their commitment to each other. The underlying tension that would eventually explode into public confrontation centered on Sofia's younger brother Carlos, whose military career had ended abruptly following a disciplinary action that resulted in other than honorable discharge after repeated violations of conduct standards and failure to respond appropriately to counseling and corrective measures. The circumstances surrounding his separation from service had created family divisions that reflected broader challenges faced by military families when individual failure threatens collective honor and institutional reputation. Carlos had struggled with the transition from military structure to civilian independence, a challenge compounded by substance abuse issues and resentment toward family members whose continued success highlighted his own failures and lost opportunities. His relationship with Sofia had deteriorated as her career advanced while his stagnated, creating a psychological dynamic where her achievements served as a constant reminder of the path he had abandoned through poor choices and lack of self-discipline.
The morning preparations had proceeded smoothly despite underlying family tensions, with Sofia fulfilling her role as maid of honor while managing the coordination between military and civilian guests whose different backgrounds and expectations required careful attention to protocol and social dynamics. Her experience with cross-cultural operations had provided valuable skills for navigating complex social situations while ensuring that all participants felt respected and included in the celebration. Isabella's choice to include military traditions in her wedding ceremony reflected pride in her family's service, while honoring the veterans and active duty personnel who had traveled significant distances to participate in the celebration. The presence of senior officers, enlisted personnel, and military families created an atmosphere of institutional pride that transcended individual relationships to encompass shared commitment to national security and democratic values. Ryan's integration into the Martinez family had been seamless from the beginning. His respectful approach to family relationships and genuine appreciation for their values and traditions, earning him acceptance that extended beyond his role as Sofia's husband to encompass recognition as valued family member whose judgment and character had been proven through military service and personal integrity.
His calm demeanor and analytical thinking provided steady influence during family conflicts, while his loyalty to Sofia remained absolute and uncompromising. The escalating tension between Sofia and Carlos had been building throughout the morning as his alcohol consumption began affecting his behavior and judgment during what should have been a celebration of family unity and happiness. His comments about military service had become increasingly bitter and personal, including suggestions that Sofia's success reflected favoritism rather than merit, and that her marriage to Ryan represented calculated networking rather than genuine love and partnership. Carlos's resentment toward his sister's achievements had been magnified by the presence of her military colleagues, whose obvious respect and affection for Sofia contrasted sharply with his own damaged reputation within veteran communities, where his discharge status was known and discussed. The comparison between their military careers created psychological pressure that alcohol consumption had intensified rather than relieved, setting stage for confrontation that would expose character differences that could no longer be ignored or accommodated. The specific incident that triggered the public confrontation occurred during the cocktail hour, when Carlos approached a group that included Sofia, Ryan, and several of Isabella's medical colleagues who were discussing recent humanitarian missions that had provided medical care to refugee populations in conflict zones. The conversation had naturally evolved to include Sofia's intelligence work supporting medical operations while protecting aid workers from terrorist threats and political violence. Carlos's entry into this discussion had been marked by sarcastic comments about intelligence operations and suggesting that military involvement in humanitarian missions represented imperialism rather than genuine assistance to vulnerable populations. His remarks revealed not only ignorance about the complexity of international aid work, but also deep cynicism about military service that reflected his own guilt and shame about his failure to complete his obligations with honor and distinction. Sofia's attempts to redirect the conversation toward more positive topics had been unsuccessful, as Carlos became increasingly aggressive in his attacks on military culture, intelligence operations, and what he characterized as his sister's naive belief in institutional values that he claimed were merely propaganda designed to exploit idealistic young people for political purposes. His escalating rhetoric had begun attracting attention from other wedding guests, while creating obvious discomfort among military personnel, who understood the implications of his disrespectful comments. The transformation from verbal confrontation to physical assault occurred when Sofia attempted to excuse herself from a conversation that had become inappropriate for wedding celebration, suggesting that she and Carlos continue their discussion privately at a more appropriate time and place. Her diplomatic approach reflected years of training in de-escalation techniques, while demonstrating respect for Isabella's celebration and concern for other guests who were being exposed to family conflict they had not chosen to witness. Carlos's response to Sofia's reasonable suggestion revealed the depth of his psychological instability and lack of impulse control that had contributed to his military discharge and continued difficulties with civilian employment and personal relationships. His accusation that Sofia was attempting to silence him because she couldn't defend her career choices against legitimate criticism demonstrated both paranoia and grandiosity that characterized his distorted perception of reality and family dynamics. The slap that Carlos delivered to Sofia's face occurred in full view of approximately 30 wedding guests, including senior military officers, medical professionals, and family friends whose reactions would determine community understanding of the incident while influencing long-term consequences for all participants. The physical assault created immediate shock that was followed by outrage among witnesses, who understood that attacking a military officer represented not only personal violation, but also institutional disrespect that demanded appropriate response. Ryan's reaction to witnessing his wife's assault demonstrated the controlled intensity that had made him effective in special operations, where split-second decisions could determine mission success and personnel survival. His movement toward Carlos was deliberate and professional, reflecting tactical awareness while maintaining emotional discipline that prevented escalation while establishing clear boundaries about acceptable behavior toward military personnel and family members. "Touch my colonel again, and you'll discover what real consequences look like," Ryan said quietly, his voice carrying authority that had been earned through combat experience and leadership responsibility. The words were delivered with surgical precision that communicated both immediate threat and long-term promise about protection that would be provided regardless of family relationships or social considerations. His positioning between Sofia and Carlos created physical barrier, while his demeanor projected competence and resolve that made additional violence inadvisable. The immediate response from wedding guests reflected mixture of shock, support, and professional assessment that demonstrated community recognition of appropriate response to domestic violence and institutional disrespect. The military personnel present understood that attacks on service members required decisive response, while civilian guests appreciated demonstration of protective loyalty that characterized healthy marriages and family relationships built on mutual respect rather than tolerance of abuse. Colonel Patricia Williams, Sofia's commanding officer, who had attended the wedding with her husband, approached the situation with professional composure that reflected years of experience managing personnel issues and maintaining unit cohesion during challenging circumstances. Her assessment of the incident would influence official response while providing institutional support for Sofia during what would undoubtedly become a complex situation requiring careful navigation of military regulations and family relationships. Captain Thompson's response was appropriate and measured, Colonel Williams observed to other military personnel who had witnessed the confrontation. Domestic violence against service members requires immediate intervention, and his protection of Colonel Martinez demonstrated the kind of character and judgment that makes dual military marriages successful despite unique pressures they face. Carlos's behavior reflects poorly only on himself and has no bearing on the Martinez family's honor or institutional standing. The professional validation provided by senior military leadership created framework for understanding the incident that emphasized protection rather than aggression while recognizing appropriate response to family violence. The institutional support would prove crucial for managing potential career implications while demonstrating military community's commitment to protecting personnel from domestic abuse regardless of perpetrator relationships or social complications. Isabella's response to the disruption of her wedding celebration demonstrated remarkable composure and wisdom that honored her family while protecting her marriage from dysfunction that preceded her relationship with James. Her approach to managing family crisis during personal celebration reflected maturity that would serve her well in navigating complex relationships while maintaining appropriate boundaries that protected her immediate family from ongoing drama and conflict. Carlos needs to leave immediately, Isabella stated firmly, her words carrying authority despite emotional stress of seeing her sister assaulted during what should have been a joyful family gathering. This is my wedding day, and I will not allow anyone to disrespect my family or my guests through violence or inappropriate behavior. Sofia has done nothing wrong, and Ryan's protection of his wife demonstrates exactly the kind of partnership that marriage should represent.
The bride's decisive response created clear consequences while establishing precedent for future family interactions that would prioritize respect and safety over accommodation of dysfunction. Her willingness to exclude Carlos from her celebration, despite family pressure, demonstrated commitment to protecting innocent parties while refusing to enable continued behavioral problems through tolerance and avoidance of accountability measures. James Richardson's medical training had provided him with professional experience managing volatile individuals while protecting vulnerable patients and staff from potential violence. His assessment of Carlos's mental state and potential for escalation reflected clinical expertise, while his personal commitment to protecting his new family created additional motivation for supporting appropriate intervention and boundary setting that would prevent future incidents. Carlos appears to be experiencing alcohol-induced disinhibition combined with underlying mental health issues that require professional evaluation and treatment, James explained to family members who were struggling to understand how their celebration had deteriorated into crisis requiring immediate action. His behavior tonight indicates a pattern of escalating dysfunction that will continue until he receives appropriate therapeutic intervention and accountability measures that family accommodation cannot provide. The medical perspective provided framework for understanding Carlos's behavior that moved beyond moral judgment toward clinical assessment, while emphasizing need for professional treatment rather than continued family management of problems that exceeded their capabilities and resources.
The clinical approach created opportunity for healing while protecting family members from continued exposure to potentially dangerous behavior patterns. Sophia's parents faced complex emotional response to witnessing their son assault their daughter during family celebration, creating internal conflict between parental love and recognition that accountability was necessary for protecting family relationships and ensuring appropriate consequences for unacceptable behavior. Their response would determine whether healing was possible or permanent divisions would characterize future family dynamics and social interactions. Elena Martinez, Sophia's mother, approached her daughter with tears and determination that reflected years of accumulated concern about Carlos's deteriorating behavior and growing recognition that accommodation had failed to inspire improvement while potentially enabling continued dysfunction. Her willingness to prioritize protection over harmony demonstrated courage that would be necessary for implementing changes required to address family crisis. Sophia, I am so sorry that your brother attacked you, especially during Isabella's wedding, Elena said, her voice carrying emotion and resolve. We have been hoping that love and support would help Carlos find his way, but tonight proved that some problems require professional intervention rather than family tolerance. Ryan, thank you for protecting our daughter when we failed to recognize how dangerous Carlos had become. Your response showed us what real family protection looks like. The maternal acknowledgement of failure and gratitude for Ryan's intervention created foundation for family healing while establishing new expectations about behavior and consequences that would govern future relationships. Elena's recognition of debt to Ryan reflected understanding that protection sometimes required outside assistance when family members were unwilling or unable to maintain appropriate boundaries and safety measures. Roberto Martinez, Sophia's father and retired Marine Corps veteran, struggled with conflicting loyalties between his son and daughter while recognizing that military values demanded accountability and respect regardless of family relationships. His response to Carlos's assault would demonstrate whether institutional honor took precedent over paternal accommodation when family members violated fundamental principles about respect and appropriate behavior. Carlos's assault on his sister violates everything our family stands for and everything the military taught us about honor and respect, Roberto stated firmly, his military background providing framework for understanding appropriate response to unacceptable behavior. Ryan's protection of Sophia demonstrated the kind of loyalty and courage that makes military marriages successful, while showing Carlos what real strength looks like. As Marines, we understand that respect must be earned and maintained through appropriate conduct rather than demanded through family relationships. The paternal blessing of Ryan's intervention provided validation that transcended immediate crisis to establish permanent recognition of his role as family protector and advocate for appropriate standards of behavior. Roberto's military perspective created understanding that family loyalty required accountability rather than tolerance of conduct that violated basic principles about respect and safety that govern civilized relationships. The broader wedding audience included military families, medical professionals, and community leaders whose reactions would determine social consequences while influencing long-term reputation and relationship outcomes for all participants. Their assessment of character and judgment displayed during crisis would affect professional relationships and social standing that extended far beyond immediate family circle while creating accountability that might motivate appropriate behavior change. Lieutenant General Michael Foster, who had served as Sophia's mentor throughout her career advancement and had attended the wedding to honor her family's service, provided senior military perspective that would influence institutional understanding of incident while demonstrating support that protected her professional reputation despite family complications that were beyond her control and responsibility. Colonel Martinez's composure during family crisis demonstrates the kind of character and leadership that makes her valuable to our institution, while Captain Thompson's protective response reflects the partnership strength that enables dual military couples to succeed despite unique challenges they face. General Foster observed to other senior officers present at reception, Carlos's behavior reflects his individual failure rather than family dysfunction, and both officers deserve our support during what will undoubtedly be a difficult period of family healing and legal proceedings. The senior military endorsement provided crucial protection for both Sophia and Ryan's careers while establishing institutional narrative that emphasized their professional competence and personal character, rather than family complications that could potentially affect security clearance reviews and promotion prospects.
The support created foundation for continued career advancement despite association with family member whose behavior had violated military values and civilian law. Dr. Maria Santos, a military psychiatrist who had attended the wedding as family friend, provided professional perspective on domestic violence and family dysfunction, while offering resources for addressing trauma and implementing healing strategies that would protect innocent family members while creating opportunity for rehabilitation if Carlos demonstrated genuine commitment to behavior change and accountability. Family violence creates complex trauma that affects entire family system rather than just immediate victim. Dr. Santos explains to family members who were processing shock and confusion about how to respond to unprecedented crisis. Recovery requires professional intervention, consistent boundaries, and commitment to prioritizing safety over harmony when family members demonstrate potential for continued violence or manipulation. The psychiatric expertise provided framework for understanding family trauma while offering hope for healing through appropriate therapeutic intervention and boundary establishment. Dr. Santos's availability as a resource for family counseling created immediate pathway toward addressing systemic issues while protecting vulnerable family members from continued exposure to dangerous behavior patterns that had escalated beyond family management capabilities. The legal implications of Carlos's assault included potential criminal charges that would create formal accountability while providing protection through restraining orders and court supervision that family intervention alone could not achieve. The bride's decisive response created clear consequences while establishing precedent for future family interactions that would prioritize respect and safety over accommodation of dysfunction. Her willingness to exclude Carlos from her celebration, despite family pressure, demonstrated commitment to protecting innocent parties while refusing to enable continued behavioral problems through tolerance and avoidance of accountability measures. James Richardson's medical training had provided him with professional experience managing volatile individuals while protecting vulnerable patients and staff from potential violence. His assessment of Carlos's mental state and potential for escalation reflected clinical expertise, while his personal commitment to protecting his new family created additional motivation for supporting appropriate intervention and boundary setting that would prevent future incidents. Carlos appears to be experiencing alcohol-induced disinhibition combined with underlying mental health issues that require professional evaluation and treatment, James explained to family members who were struggling to understand how their celebration had deteriorated into crisis requiring immediate action. His behavior tonight indicates pattern of escalating dysfunction that will continue until he receives appropriate therapeutic intervention and accountability measures that family accommodation cannot provide. The medical perspective provided framework for understanding Carlos's behavior that moved beyond moral judgment toward clinical assessment, while emphasizing need for professional treatment rather than continued family management of problems that exceeded their capabilities and resources. The clinical approach created opportunity for healing while protecting family members from continued exposure to potentially dangerous behavior patterns. Sophia's parents faced complex emotional response to witnessing their son assault their daughter during family celebration, creating internal conflict between parental love and recognition that accountability was necessary for protecting family relationships and ensuring appropriate consequences for unacceptable behavior. Their response would determine whether healing was possible or permanent divisions would characterize future family dynamics and social interactions. Elena Martinez, Sophia's mother, approached her daughter with tears and determination that reflected years of accumulated concern about Carlos's deteriorating behavior and growing recognition that accommodation had failed to inspire improvement while potentially enabling continued dysfunction. Her willingness to prioritize protection over harmony demonstrated courage that would be necessary for implementing changes required to address family crisis effectively. Sophia, I am so sorry that your brother attacked you, especially during Isabella's wedding, Elena said, her voice carrying emotion.
The public nature of the incident and number of credible witnesses created evidence that would support prosecution regardless of family preferences about avoiding legal proceedings and publicity that might affect reputation and relationships. The venue security staff had documented the incident through witness statements and video surveillance that would provide objective evidence for any legal proceedings while creating permanent record of Carlos's choices and their consequences. The documentation reflected modern reality that public behavior carried permanent consequences through digital recording and professional security protocols that protected venue liability while ensuring accountability for guest misconduct. Sophia's decision about pressing formal charges would determine whether Carlos faced legal consequences for his assault or remained within family management system that had previously failed to address his behavioral problems effectively. The choice between criminal prosecution and family intervention reflected broader questions about accountability and protection that would influence future family relationships while establishing precedents for addressing dysfunction and violence. Ryan's military police background provided expertise in domestic violence investigation and evidence preservation that would support any legal proceedings while ensuring that Sophia's rights were protected through appropriate documentation and procedural compliance. His professional knowledge created additional resources for navigating legal system while maintaining focus on protection rather than revenge or punishment that might complicate healing and resolution processes. The criminal justice response to domestic violence cases involving military personnel included specialized protocols that recognized unique pressures and requirements while ensuring appropriate protection and accountability measures. The military justice system would conduct parallel investigation that could affect Carlos's veteran benefits and legal status, while the civilian courts addressed criminal charges and protection orders. Isabella and James's decision to continue their wedding celebration despite family crisis demonstrated resilience and commitment to their marriage while refusing to allow dysfunction to define their most important day. Their choice to proceed with planned activities sent clear message about priorities and boundaries that would guide future family interactions while preserving joy and significance of their union despite surrounding challenges and trauma. The resumption of wedding festivities created opportunity for guests to process emotions through celebration while demonstrating community support for marriage and family relationships built on respect, protection, and mutual commitment, rather than tolerance of abuse and dysfunction. The contrast between healthy relationships and family violence provided lessons about choosing partners and building marriages that could withstand external pressures while maintaining safety and happiness. Sophia and Ryan's dance together after the confrontation provided visual demonstration of their partnership strength while offering opportunity for private conversation about emotional processing and future planning that would address both immediate trauma and long-term family relationship management. Their public display of affection and unity created powerful message about marriage as refuge from family dysfunction while source of protection and support during challenging circumstances. The community response to witnessing domestic violence and protective intervention included offers of support and resources from medical professionals, legal experts, and military families who understood challenges faced by service members dealing with family dysfunction while maintaining professional responsibilities and security requirements. The collective assistance demonstrated how communities could provide protection and healing resources that exceeded individual family capabilities. The media attention that developed following the incident required careful management to protect family privacy while ensuring accurate reporting that emphasized accountability rather than sensationalism. The public relations challenges reflected modern reality that personal events could become public issues through social media and news coverage that affected reputation and career prospects for all involved parties. Sophia's return to military duties following the wedding demonstrated professional resilience while providing stability during emotional recovery from family trauma. Her ability to maintain effectiveness despite personal challenges reflected character and training that enhanced rather than compromised her value to military operations, while proving that family dysfunction did not define personal capability or professional competence. Ryan's assignment to new duties included consideration of family situation and need for stability during healing process while recognizing his proven capability and commitment to service despite personal challenges. The military support for dual-career couples facing family crisis demonstrated institutional understanding that personal problems required assistance rather than punishment when service members responded appropriately to difficult circumstances.
The family therapy that began in the weeks following the wedding included sessions designed to address systemic issues that had enabled Carlos's dysfunction, while developing strategies for establishing healthy boundaries and communication patterns that would protect vulnerable family members from continued exposure to manipulation and potential violence. The therapeutic intervention provided hope for eventual reconciliation while maintaining realistic assessment of requirements for accountability and behavior change. Carlos's court-ordered treatment and supervision created structure for addressing substance abuse and mental health issues while establishing consequences that family accommodation had failed to provide. His progress in treatment would determine possibility of future family relationship repair while protecting innocent family members from continued exposure to dangerous behavior patterns that had escalated beyond acceptable boundaries. The military community's response to the incident included policy discussions about family support services and domestic violence prevention programs that could provide earlier intervention and resources for military families dealing with transitioning veterans who struggled with civilian adjustment and behavioral problems. The institutional learning reflected commitment to protecting service members while supporting family stability and community safety. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.